Welcome to the Spirit of Truth video podcast. Joining me today is my good friend Lowel Pierce. Welcome, Lowel.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, so some of you guys might not know that Lowel is a talented filmmaker, videographer, and he's actually helped set up the original Urantia Book Network studio at Pine Street Church that we used to have in Boulder.
Yeah, that's right.
But Lowell's here for a different reason. Lowell's here to talk about his book called Rocking the Boat, which is a pretty cool and intriguing book where he talks about how Christianity needs a little bit of an updating in more affiliation towards the real teachings of Jesus. So that's why I invited Lowell over here to talk about the book. So Lowell, I congratulate you on this fine production.
Thank you.
And we'll get into this.
Mm-hmm.
But first, I just want, a little introduction about you and maybe how you found the Urantia Book.
Okay. So I'm, born and raised in Colorado, pretty small town, Greeley, which at the time was pretty small. So kind of a small town guy. Went to the First Congregational Church, which I found out later was, that's what the Pilgrims and the Puritans were. They were Congregationalists when they came here back in the 1600s. Because basically they didn't want to have to deal with an archbishop or the pope. They thought every church should be kind of governed by the people of that church. So that's kind of what it was. It was I think pretty middle of the road, pretty liberal, but not too liberal. Still traditional in a lot of things. And, it was a good upbringing to just kind of go to a church and hear about Jesus and the whole thing. So I had some background in Christianity, for sure. In fact, when I went to college, which was at Colorado State, CSU up here in Fort Collins, not too far down the road.
Yeah.
But I majored in journalism, and I remember I was writing some stories for the campus newspaper, and there'd be this Hare Krishna group that would come to campus every week or two. It seems like they'd come down, they'd be chanting and dancing like between classes in the commons area. And I was always kind of blown away by them because I'd never seen anything like that. Coming from Greeley and everything's like, who are these people and what are they doing? And so I wrote a story about them. I did a little article, like I interviewed them and just try to find out what their thing was, with the Hare Krishnas. That was kind of my first taste of sort of an exotic religion, something that's not Christian. It's, more Hindu influenced, I guess. And from that, I got interested in other religions as well, just, to find out about them, reading books and stuff like that in college. So it seemed like, Buddhism was interesting, Native American stuff. At that time, there was New Age kind of things going on, a lot of New Age things going on.
Yeah.
So Islam, I had heard about Islam. All these things I was wanting to find more about. So I had an interest in religions. And later, I went on to get a job at a TV news station. I was a news photographer for a while in Colorado Springs, Channel 13.
Cool.
KRDO, Corretto. It was the ABC affiliate, but it was cool to do news stories. That's kind of what I was trained for in college. I got into film production at that time. They didn't have video yet. And so it was a chance to use my skills at learning at college and everything. Anyway, it led to, after I did this TV news photography job for a while, I got a call from another filmmaker, friend of mine, who said he got a contract in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
And did I want to go over there and work for a while as single status, doing more like industrial films and photography and stuff over there.
Okay.
So, that was kind of a fork in the road, I guess, because I was doing okay at Channel 13. In fact, I had a job kind of lined up at Channel 9. I thought, okay, I can maybe just move up to Denver, get into more of a, the bigger time media up there.
Yeah, bigger market there.
Yeah, I had a new girlfriend, I was like, I was doing okay.
You're on the up and up, man.
But yeah, I was, but then I got this call and I thought, I've never seen the world. This might be a good chance to go off and see the world.
Yeah.
So I thought about it for a while and I decided to sign up and, go to Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
So I was 27, I think. And first time I'd been out of the country. And, right into the heart of Islam.
Wow.
Lived in Riyadh.
Oh, Riyadh. Wow.
Yeah. So it was that was a good wake-up call as far as the religions, because I got to obviously learn a lot about Islam, living there for a couple of years. And then when I was done with that job, I also got to go to Europe on some vacations, went to Egypt, got to see quite a bit of stuff.
Awesome.
Then coming back home, I decided to go the backdoor route. So I went through, I spent some time in Thailand, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and Japan.
Awesome.
Just kind of a slow trip back home to learn, about the Asian culture a little bit, and also Buddhism. All these things were kind of floating into my brain and just, mixing around and everything. And when I got back to the States, I was thinking about the Bible and Islam and how they kind of had some similarities, but they're really different. And one thing about the Bible, with Jesus, there's like this big gap in the life of Jesus, from age 12 to about 30.
Right. Those years that were unspoken of.
Yeah, kind of unspoken years. So I was thinking, well, maybe this would be like an interesting documentary, maybe a little book or something about the missing years.
Yeah.
I know that I wasn't the first person to wonder about that. I'm sure a lot of people have. But anyway, I started doing some research on missing years. And one thing that I came upon was a friend of mine said, well, okay, you're studying that. Have you ever heard of the Urantia Book? And I said, no, what is that? He goes, well, I think they talk about the missing years in the Urantia Book of Jesus. They go through every year of his life, I think. In fact, if you're interested, I have another copy right here.
Cool.
He was like, he was kind of newly into it, and he was like wanting to tell other people.
He was doing outreach right there.
Some outreach, yeah. So I said, oh, great, yeah, I would love to have this book, and had no idea it was so thick or some big blue book. Totally. Back then, I thought, wow, I don't know if I can get through that, but I started reading it, and I went right to the part 4.
Oh, Teachings of Jesus.
Teachings of Jesus,
Life
because
teachings,
I wanted to see what it had to say about these years, from 12 to 18, 18 years from 12 to 30.
Right.
So I was amazed to see that it had a whole bunch to say about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It had like each year kind of summarized of what happened and, what Jesus was up to, what his family was up to. Because, that's kind of like the formulative years from 12 to 30. I mean, that's a major chunk of
growing into
life.
Adulthood.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what got me into the Urantia Book initially.
It finally fed that void, that hunger that you had for the missing years.
Right. Yeah. I felt that void because I thought, man, this is like, it wasn't just like somebody's skeptical thought, maybe this happened, or their imagination that, well, he might have done this or that. It was like authoritative. It was like, here's what he did when he was 13, 14, 15. And it's like, wow, where did this come from?
And the intricate and intimate details around him at those ages with his family and all those things. It's not some kind of, I don't know, spell, new agey kind of thing. You just feel the conviction that, this is what a human would go through.
Right. It just felt authentic.
Yeah.
I just got that feeling like this is not hyped up something somebody's, like imagination of what happened.
Right.
It's almost like somebody was there documenting his life as he was living it in real time.
Right.
That's how I felt. And, later on, I kind of learned that that's, in a way how it was.
Essentially, that was what was going on.
Yeah. So much new information, so much like more details. It just, it made, I was kind of like turned off by the Bible because of all the scandals and kind of like the television evangelists who would get caught up in corruption and money and, sex scandals and just how a lot of things were so, I guess, interpreted literally in the Bible. A lot of the more conservative branches of Christianity just went by, every word is the word of God. You've got to believe it. You've got to follow it.
Inerrant all the way through.
Infallible.
Infallible, yeah.
And I just can never buy into that, And plus a few other things like the whole concept of atonement. So anyway, the Urantia Book was like a huge breath of fresh air. Like, wow, this makes sense to me. I'd pretty much kind of given up on traditional Christianity, but this kind of brought me back full circle into taking a whole second look at this.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm kind of the same way, where I grew up Roman Catholic, and thank you for sharing that. But where I grew up Roman Catholic, and then just kind of got turned off by all of the stuff that was in that culture, but had the foundation. Yeah. So that when I found the Urantia Book later, I knew these moments in time. I knew what I learned, all the names, all the tradition, all the customs, like everything that I learned in Roman Catholic school. Now I could apply it to something that felt more real. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't starting from scratch. That's why I was really appreciative in that full circle of coming back, of leaving with Jesus and kind of trying to reveal a little bit more about what he was doing from what we learned in the Urantia Book, as opposed to being just like dogmatized and stuck in those doctrines that you don't want to break.
Exactly. So much dogma.
Yeah.
That, had to I had to get past. It's like that always was kept me from really putting my heart into Christianity. It's
sure.
like, because it just didn't feel right,
I hear you.
So,
all right. So you found the Urantia Book, and then it seems that you've taken a path of new global empathy and understanding with where you can put it all into place, all those different religions and stuff, right?
Right. So having kind of a background of interest in different religions like that helped me kind of assimilate some of the stuff in the Urantia Book, because it's very open to other religions too, and science,
Absolutely.
And I was going to say too that part of my family growing up, and as I became an adult, they became more like I would say devout fundamentalist Christians, more like evangelical Christians.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay.
Which was great. I mean, great people, love them dearly and everything. It's just that we couldn't have very many intimate conversations about religion because they seem to be like so focused on this is the way it is because this is what it says in the Bible. So therefore, that's it. End of discussion.
No questioning. Yeah.
So I always kind of like rebuild a little bit against the really literal interpretation, because it just didn't feel right, especially knowing about other religions and everything. There had to be kind of this common theme from God to us, this connection of all these different concepts we had of God. And, that we've had like different people come to give us information, enlightenment, maybe start different religions, or religions were based on them.
Right.
But really, Jesus is the only one who claimed to be, a son of God. And so I always thought, this is either all wrong or all right. This is truth, or it's just
gobbledygook.
Yeah, falsehood.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the Urantia Book really helped me see kind of the bigger picture of the whole, not just, our little tiny world, like the universe and beyond the universe. And it just like opened my mind and perspective to so many other things.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's a lot of, I would say, coherence that comes with the Urantia Book.
Mm-hmm.
It puts things that we might only have little fragments of into real interpretation of what's going on, and you can relate as a humanist to why I understand that. You know, especially as a student of journalism, I majored in journalism as well. There's such a passion for me behind telling the story and finding the details of that story and bringing out the value of it, right? And so that's why I really appreciate the Urantia Book of doing that reporting of things that we don't have those details of, but bringing the value out so that we can incorporate that into our life. It's like a stabilizingness that we get in the coherence of the goodness of that.
Yeah, and it's just like reporting in a way, you know, because obviously back then we didn't have tape recorders and video cameras and phones and everything like that. They had to go by written word, spoken voice, you know, spoken stories first, especially the whole story, the Gospels of Jesus. I always thought, how can I believe every little word in here, knowing that it's like at least 2,000 years old or something? Yeah. Starting off with somebody just hearing Jesus, right, teach, and then processing it through their brain, maybe at some point writing some notes down, like one of the apostles, taking notes, which for a long time were just passed along to other people, or maybe the spoken word. And it took a long time before the first actual gospel was put out there.
Right.
You know, I think it was
Mark. Now this is a good segue here because Lowell does a great job in the beginning of his book, Rocking the Boat. I'll put a link to it on a YouTube channel. He starts out with understanding how the Gospels were written, who wrote them, and how it grew. So from what I learned from what you're writing and from the Urantia Book is that John Mark was kind of the standard of the Gospel of Mark, written by John Mark, who was a young guy when Jesus was around and then didn't write it till much later. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of one of the foundations that the other Gospels kind of worked off of. None of the apostles wrote the Gospels except for John. John wrote the Gospel of John, according to John.
Yeah, and a lot of them had like students. A lot of them had students who would, follow up on their work and actually publish or put out or write down these Gospels. So I have it kind of all notated in the book. And
right.
It's very, kind of complex and everything. But I thought it was interesting that it's not just like, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, people say, well, who wrote the Gospels? They might just say, those guys, those four guys. Well, not exactly, There's a big backstory to each of those Gospels, I think. And it's interesting because in the Urantia Book, it talks about that. It can take each one and kind of, here's what really happened, And to me, it's believable because it is such a big picture of everything that to me, after I read it for a while, I just kept reconfirming like, yes, this is the truth.
Yeah.
It's like we're finally being trusted with the truth. It took a while to get this revelation like into our consciousness, but here it is, and it's ringing true.
Yeah. I mean, you can even like go back in the Bible and then you start reading some of the stuff and you're like, oh yeah, wait, that's what the Urantia Book was talking about, and there's details in there that I wouldn't have picked up if I didn't know.
Yeah.
So there is confirming evidence in it. You just can't have that. From my experience, and kind of like what you're doing is I exhausted all of my world religion like knowledge, and I didn't feel that I knew God anymore. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know God. Mm-hmm. So I trusted the friends in my life and family who read the Urantia Book, and that's when I decided to dig into it. Mm-hmm. And then you get this conviction in your heart. You're like, yes, this is true. Like, mm-hmm. I understand what it's speaking about. And in that way, it's very liberating for the individual to be able to still be in a religious construct without these doctrines and like conflictions, hypocrisy, and control.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about the Urantia Book and the teachings of Jesus is that it liberates the individual from that self-bondage of all of that mental noise, that you can be liberated knowing that we're all children of God, right?
Exactly.
Very freeing.
Right. Another thing that, one of the things that had bugged me about kind of traditional Christianity was the atonement doctrine, right? Which is a real foundation.
You want to explain that for people who might not know what atonement doctrine is?
Okay. Well, the atonement doctrine basically states that, Jesus laid down his life as a sacrifice to atone for our sins, humanity's sins. Okay. And kind of the whole group of humanity since the time of Adam and Eve, which gets into another thing with the original sin of Adam and Eve, which can be, these things kind of imply a lot of guilt inject a lot of guilt into Christianity.
Yes.
Okay, like you're born into original sin. Jesus died for your sins. And so you owe him, It's kind of that implied thing that there's some guilt involved here. If you mess up,
It's almost like there's reparations involved here. Like you owe punishment. A penance. You have a penance now you need to pay.
Right. So there's punishment, there's fear, which kind of go together, fear and punishment.
Yeah.
The whole thing of, going to hell, you could burn eternally.
Right.
That always, of course, scared me. Scared me when I was, growing up and everything. But it's like, I don't think Jesus wants us to be coerced or guilted into believing in him and his teachings.
That's good.
It's got to come from the heart, from love, And I think the whole thing that, as I understand it, when Jesus came here, especially through the Urantia Book, it talks about how one part of his mission was to reveal the nature of God.
Yeah.
The God is not this vengeful, wrathful, jealous, vindictive God. He's actually a loving God. To think of God as our Father in heaven. I mean, and every normal father loves their children, and we're basically children of God, sons and daughters in kind of a spiritual sense. But the same thing is like our whole mode, I think, of Christianity had been coming from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
This God of revenge and judgment and jealousy. I'm a jealous God. And somehow that was taken into the New Testament, I think, in the times of Jesus, when a lot of people who were Jews, I'm sure, were converting to this new following.
Oh, yeah, they were the first ones.
Yeah, of Jesus after the whole crucifixion.
Oh, yeah. After Pentecost, they started.
After Pentecost, it's the ascension and everything. So one way to reach those people would be to kind of bring in what they're familiar with, right? And if you look back in Leviticus, I mean, that's an eye-opener to read Leviticus.
To put it lightly.
Yeah, if you can't get to sleep some night or something, just start reading Leviticus and see how it was back then, because the whole nature of their worship of the ancient, Jewish people was really centered around sacrifice, animal sacrifice, to get atonement for sins. Okay, so if somebody, and they had all kinds of different situations. Yeah,
exactly. Different laws and rules around what you needed to atone for and why.
Right. Let's say that you were guilty of something, or you committed a sin or something like that. There'd be a certain procedure. Let's say that you had to bring one of your unblemished rams from your herd, which was, money back then. Your money was tied up in livestock, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of hurt a little bit if you had to bring one of your best rams and take it to the priest because you had been caught doing something and you wanted atonement from that sin or that guilt, right? So you had to go to the priest, and the priest would sacrifice this ram in a ritualistic way, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
It was all part of the worship system. But that's the only way that if I had sinned, I was going to get atoned
with blood.
with blood.
Yeah.
Because it says in Leviticus, the life is in the blood.
Right.
And kind of implies that nothing can be atoned for unless there is blood involved as a sacrifice.
So now putting this together in your book and through understanding the Urantia Book and being a Christian yourself, you kind of see where Paul, who's a huge evangel, but didn't live with Jesus. He had his transformation process on the road to Damascus. And he was part of, was he like a Pharisee or part of the Sanhedrin or something like that? Pharisee. That he was persecuting Christians until he had his transformation, but yet he made a compromise when he was preaching the religion of Jesus and adopted what he knew as making Jesus's death was the final sacrifice of blood for all of us, right? So trying to end that chapter of sacrifice,
right?
But it was a bit of a compromise that we're still dealing with right now, as you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Because, a lot of the New Testament are the letters of Paul.
Right.
Right. And he was an awesome writer. He was an awesome apostle.
Yeah.
Nobody
marketed like he did back then.
No, nobody was as committed as he was. He was like, he did everything to get the story out there.
Yeah.
He went through a lot of personal
persecution,
trauma. And yet he didn't really, I think, understand the whole concept of atonement. He brought that forth from his Jewish past, I think, his teaching, his understanding.
Yeah.
Okay. And it became very, influential in Christianity because it's in so many verses of Paul's letters.
Yeah, it's almost like if you're not with Jesus, and like we are so blessed to have the Urantia Book where we can actually hear the real words of Jesus and what he was saying to his apostles and his family and stuff like that, where you can start to learn what he means when he talks about what real spirit reality is. And if you're not on board with understanding that, there's a tendency to slide back to that material blood thing. It's all in the material stuff. So there needs to be like flesh for flesh. Like it's a trade instead of God giving you this stuff freely.
Right.
Like, and you've been blessed freely, so freely you give type of thing. There's a sharing community in that as opposed to canceling life for privilege or something like that.
Right. Because the Old Testament was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. There was a very harsh kind of penalty for anything. Okay. And so it seemed like God was this, kind of mean person up in heaven there that watched us and judged us. And if we did anything wrong, we were going to get zapped in some kind of way.
Yeah.
And then Jesus comes along and said, no, that's not how
it's not my father, bro.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. It's not my father.
Yeah.
No, think of God as your father in heaven, as your loving father in heaven. I mean, that's a radical turnaround, I think, for the people back then.
Yeah, well, you remind me of that part in the Urantia Book when Jesus, might remember, he was like 12 or something, and he went to the temple in Jerusalem for the holidays, and he's watching all the blood and sacrifice that was ensuing, and he got so traumatized he had to leave, and he's talking to his dad. He's like, certainly the Father in heaven loves me more than you do, my Father here on earth. How can he expect there to be blood and death for him? If he loves me more than you do, would you want me to do all that stuff? So it's just this logic that was brought in by a young Jesus that you can see started to change things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big change because atonement, the doctrine of atonement is still a huge part of so many denominations in Christianity, right?
Absolutely.
It definitely hasn't gone away. It hasn't evolved very far.
Right.
And again, it's kind of fear-based. It's guilt-based, I think. But to go against it, to speak against it is, blasphemy.
Absolutely.
To a lot of people, like heresy or something, if you don't believe in atonement, because I think some Christians see that the main mission of Jesus was to come here and sacrifice his life to save us, basically to atone for our sins, the sins of humanity. He had to pay a price. He had to pay a blood price to do it, because getting back to Leviticus and the whole thing,
eye for an
eye, and atonement comes through sacrifice and blood. Those are all kind of connected for so many years.
Well, I mean, it sounds like, that notion is more of a darker type of message than it is of stand up and be proud. You're in the kingdom of your loving Father. Now grow in the kingdom, young man, kind of thing, as opposed to, no, it's because your parents messed up. And so now that's why you're the way you are. And now you need to atone. So you got to kill something. And then you'll be seen as favorable. That just doesn't speak to the development of the person and the soul. We have decisions to make, not these rules that confine us. I believe in the Urantia Book, it says that law is life itself, and in accordance in that life is inherent God's will, and learning to follow God's will is the real law of life, not man-made primitive sacrificial things. And so that's one of the challenges that Jesus had to reveal in the nature of God, is how God loves you, all of us. He still sees you, he's not judging you, and still loves you even in your frailties. And that was the big revelation, that we're still you and I are here on this planet trying to communicate that, right?
Yeah, we're still trying to communicate that, and getting a lot of feedback from more traditional Christianity, because they just want to change. I think so many people, they have strong beliefs. They're awesome people. I love so many people who are traditional evangelical Christians, I would say, part of my family.
Right.
It's just like they sort of have blinders on, I think. They're not willing to kind of take the blinders off and look around a little bit, that, hey, yeah, maybe this doesn't make sense. Maybe God, if Jesus is God's only begotten Son, would God really need to send him here and sacrifice his life so God could feel forgiven?
What
for
loving
our sins?
parent would do that to a child?
Yeah, exactly.
It speaks of narcissism to me, by saying, oh, God's offended by these petty things, so he's going to punish you. That's what narcissists do. They want to just destroy you so that you're not even there, so that they can just feel more powerful than someone who threatened them. And this narcissistic religious ideology is still pervasive on this planet. Some are chosen over others, and it's because they sacrifice these certain things. That's just such a misunderstanding of the nature of God that it does become frustrating for me every once in a while, where I see the way it plays out, and I know that God's not even there in that type of thinking, because that's of man, that's of worldly things. And that's why I feel like there isn't an understanding of what the real spirit is, what spirit realities are. So that's our challenge. It's like, we need to sacrifice blood in order to really accept spirit. So let's move beyond the blood and let's bring in the spirit. And that's something that we all have in common, right? We're all indwelt with God. So that's a unifying thing that Jesus said.
Well, I think that's right. And that's why the Urantia Book was such a refreshing thing for me to read and get reinforcement of these feelings that I have had inside all this time. God is a God of love. Jesus, that was his main thing. Love one another as I have loved you. Love your neighbor. Love your enemy.
That's a great point. And I'd like to get back to who is your neighbor, and because that was one of those things that Jesus was butting heads with Jewish leadership. They felt only they needed to protect each other instead of, well, who's your neighbor? Meaning we're all God's children, so everyone's your freaking neighbor, dude. But I think it's. I would like to go into some of the things that you chose to put in the book, and I might mess up the quote, but I remember, I think it was from the book of John, where you put in there that God is love, and love has no place in fear, because fear is of punishment.
Right.
And God is not there.
Exactly.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. That's a powerful quote because, fear is basically the opposite of love. Fear and punishment kind of go hand in hand, right? But fear, love and fear can't exist in the same space at the same time.
Absolutely.
So you got to kind of choose one or the other. And I know there's a lot of things that cause fear in our lives for sure. But ultimately, when you think of God, do you want to think of fear or do you want to think of love and acceptance?
Unconditional
love and acceptance.
Yeah, well, it makes me think of what relationship abuse can be, where there's almost a traumatized attachment that can evolve, where you think you love the person who's abusing you. Mm-hmm. And that seems like that kind of bipolar disconnect in some of these Abrahamic religions, where I love God, he loves me, but he also tortures me and needs me to sacrifice things. That's a real cognitive dissonance that can drive a human wild, I believe.
Yeah. That's some psychological damage that has happened, I think, to certain groups of people. I mean, I'm not saying I'm above that or anything, but I think just it's a trap. Mm-hmm. The whole thing of narcissism and abusive relationships, where there's control. Control is a big part of that relationship, and that can happen in religion too. There's a lot of control being thrown around out there. Absolutely. Through the church, through individual pastors or ministers or priests or whatever. It's a real temptation, right? Yeah. Control. Yeah. And I think that's gotten mixed up with religion, not all the time, but too many times. Through our past, there's been controls, and then wars break out because one person wants to control the religion this way. This is how it happened. This is what you should believe. No, this is what you should believe because it says here in my book here. No, yeah, but it says in my book here. And so we have these collisions of wars. Like in the Middle East.
Oh man. Yeah. Well, when you look at like the confliction of beliefs versus liberation of faith, what we do have in common is that we all believe in a loving in a creator or something. There's God, there's spirit. This is the commonalities. Even Jesus said, look, you're never going to think alike, look alike, or act alike. But what you are alike is that you've been indwelt with the Spirit of God. And your spirit potentials are alike. That's the one thing that unites you. And here we have such divisive ideology around supposed God behavior.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm appreciative of you taking on how it might be time for Christianity to update itself through some of its teachings, I mean, I don't know if you want to take us through some details in there that you might want to share with us. That would be nice.
Well, yeah, I think Christianity is due for an update. It's just like we update our phones, our computers, the software systems, because better information comes along, right? Advanced information. I think the Urantia Book has brought us this advanced information through this revelation about Christianity. If we read the Urantia Book and look at Christianity, it's like, whoa, it does need to be updated. There's a lot of old stuff in there that's been dragged along since the Old Testament, way back, and has not been updated, mainly out of fear. Like, people don't want to rock the boat. People don't want to offend God. They think that's an offense to offend God if they change anything, It's like not a word is supposed to be changed, And it's like, it's real narrow-minded thinking, but I know where they're coming from. A lot of times people come from a really respectful and devout place that they want to do what God wants them to do, right? Like, we don't want to offend God. We don't want to go against God, but it just doesn't feel right what it says here.
But what if God sounds offensive? You know what I mean?
And what if God is finally saying, you need to wake up. You need to update your religion because you're like way behind the times.
Yeah, and by that, when God sounds offensive, I mean like when you're reading and God demands sacrifice or blood or whatever, that's offensive to me. So like, it's a cognitive dissonance around when you have moral standards that you don't want to offend truth and God, and yet you'll believe that God can be very offensive to you. And that's an abusive relationship in the way it's interpreted. That's why I'm so thankful for the life of Jesus to bring the real nature of God and how he loves each one of us so uniquely. Mm-hmm. That I even see the examples playing out in our society now of, Jesus really made an effort of showcasing that God was, for better or worse, a loving father. Yeah. Right? And to see that missing in a lot of society right now, and the repercussions of that for society, for individuals, for sophistry that can be played out on people. And then Jesus's nature of being like God in that loving father state, you just can't help but think about how he really needed to set a standard that was going to help us as a loving father would do for us, Right. And we've kind of strayed from that concept. I mean, we have ideas of maybe toxic masculinity or toxic this, and I get there needs to be a balance of things, but at the same time, I think we've moved away from that stabilizing goodness in the character of a loving father and what Jesus was representing as God in that time.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that's important too is like Christianity, I think, has been seen as sort of this, white and Western religion.
Yes.
Brought through the Roman Catholic Church. And traditionally it's been in Europe and United States and everything. And that's not how it was designed to be. I think, after reading the Urantia Book, it's designed, to be a worldwide religion, as far as like the concept of what Jesus was actually talking about. His teachings, his life and teachings were meant to like travel around the world, and any culture, any race, any kind of
any sect,
could be influenced, and it could be incorporated because it's based on the fatherhood of God, a loving fatherhood of God, and
family,
the brotherhood.
Yeah, dude.
The brotherhood and sisterhood of mankind, right?
Yeah.
The family of God. So that's universal. It's like a loving Father God in heaven, whatever your concept of that is, and that he loves us, and we should love each other like brothers and sisters, because in a sense we are. We're children of God.
Amen.
So, if we could just like live that, if we could put that into actual practice of day-to-day living, it's easy to forget, and it's easy to see, this person looks way different than I do, or believes something different. This person's from another country. This person, immigrated here. I'm not sure if they're legal or not. All these different things, religions. There's plenty of things to find at fault or find differences in people. But that common denominator, it's like, well, wait a minute, we're all children of God. I mean, from the Creator, we've been created. We have this consciousness that is a very unique gift, right? And if we could just like remember that, okay, this person is my brother or sister. Sometimes I go to a shopping mall or a place where there's a lot of people, or just think, wow, these are my brothers and sisters.
What a big family I have.
What a big family, But it's so easy to forget.
Yeah, we get to this comparison thing, and we forget that, we've got an opportunity to remember the bigger truths of that. The fact that we are all indwelt by God is what unifies us. And then what you're talking about, living that way, is in my mind, living faith. So you're living in accordance of that truth that we are all connected through God. Mm-hmm. And that transforms an individual in how they interact with the environment.
Right.
And then you see people as your family.
Yeah.
And even if, that's the whole thing with faith, is that faith versus belief. Belief is an idea that you're fixating on, versus faith, which is beyond what you can encompass. And so you got to trust and live it out. Mm-hmm. And that takes a whole lot of trust within, and not knowing, but still trusting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a big difference between, faith and trust, faith and beliefs. it has to get back to your connection, with the source, with the creator, with God. So in this book, I've tried to, go through some of these things. I talk about, I ask a lot of questions, like, what did Jesus say about achieving eternal life? What did he say? What did he actually say? What does it say in the Bible? What does it say in the Urantia Book? I compare a lot of things back and forth because there are a lot of similarities. Like the Urantia Book is nothing to fear. A lot of my Christian friends, they would never even read it or want to check it out or order it online
because they'll say it's of Satan.
It must be of Satan because it's not, it's something outside of the Bible.
Yeah.
So they don't trust it. They fear it. Okay. They don't want to be deceived, by Satan or something like that.
Right.
But if you read the Urantia Book, you'll find out that, everything is in there. And it's very similar in a lot of ways to the Bible. I mean, it just goes into great detail and a lot more accuracy, I think.
And on building off that, I would say if you're a Bible reader, this makes the Bible even more interesting.
Yeah.
If you learn the details around the Bible and the Old Testament and the New Testament, you're like, oh, now that's why I don't have to just blindly believe. I can start to see the details and what was going on with all these people and these places and what Jesus was up against and what the apostles had to do. I mean, especially Paul. If you start reading some of Paul, you see what Paul had to go through. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, he was getting persecuted by the people who he was brethren with while he's going on this living faith thing, trying to spread this gospel. Like, we can fault him for a lot of things, but at the same time, geez, what a heroic effort.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, what you're kind of, maybe it's what you're communicating is that there's a level of living that's required that isn't just stagnant belief. And Paul kind of, we can fault Paul for different things or whatever, but he was doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a boat rocker.
Yeah.
He was a major boat rocker. And, Jesus was like the most major boat rocker.
Biggest boat rocker.
We know about that out there. But there are a lot of, all the apostles really had to become their own boat rockers too, because you're rocking the boat. You're kind of going against tradition, the standard teaching that's out there. And that's, kind of what we're doing as people who read and, study the Urantia Book. We have to kind of rock the boat, I think. And that's why my title, that's why I chose that title. And it gets back to my mom, actually, who just passed. She was 102 years old.
Wow. Just
passed last Easter. Wow. And she was my best friend, confidant of everything. And we could talk about anything pretty much. But she would always tell me, because part of my family was very, strict, more like evangelical Christian. She would say, okay, well, I love talking to you about all these things, your ideas and everything, your Urantia Book and everything, but don't rock the boat with your, other family members because they're into their religion. It's working for them. Everything's good. So just don't rock the boat. Okay. Like in family discussions or something like that.
Right.
So I thought, at some point I need to rock the boat because otherwise nobody will know what I believe and why I believe it. And, we've got to be willing to kind of push the river a little bit, like rock the boat.
Yeah.
To get more people to just check it out. As this book is really kind of like a 100-page intro into, check out the Urantia Book. If you think this makes sense, the source of the Urantia Book has way, way more information than
I think you did a great job of presenting provocative concepts that are in the Bible and then juxtapositioning them against what the Urantia Book says and revealing how it's greater insight into what's really going on. And it's kind of just like a teaser for people to be like, okay, I want more now.
Right.
What else is there?
Right.
So good job with that. That's smart.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I started off when I was writing it, I was just going to make this tiny, like a booklet, kind of an intro to Urantia Book, and then it kept expanding and expanding and finally became more of a book. But that is kind of my goal, like just to open people's minds to check it out. If you're interested in truth, like a seeker of truth, whether somebody's a Christian or any other religion, or maybe a non-Christian, a non-believer in anything particular, I think you could find stuff in the Urantia book that makes sense. And it does make Christianity come alive to me. I mean, the Gospels just really came alive after I read what's in the Urantia book.
Yeah.
Because of all the details, of all the nuances of what the apostles were thinking, what Jesus is thinking, and this big perspective of the whole universe happening.
Yeah.
It just like changes the whole story.
Oh, I'm totally with you. I mean, just there's so many little lessons and details and opportunities to connect with Jesus and the apostles and everybody else who shows up in the Urantia book. I remember even, when we first set up this podcast in the Pine Street Church in Boulder, I had this like insight of like, wow, this is the first time I'm going to be on video talking about all this stuff. And I was like, interesting. I get a little bit of insight of how like, Jesus' life here, it wasn't just on this planet. Like everybody around the universe saw what he was doing, right? So it wasn't just for you and me. Mm-hmm. It was for everybody else to observe too and learn from. Right. And I felt like this added responsibility that came with that.
Yeah.
To have, I don't say I have it, but to have the ability to speak to everyone in every age of every planet as you live, in real time. That's something that my human side could feel a lot of pressure from.
Yeah. It is.
But it's nice to have the example and demonstration of someone who was human and God, but as a human, Jesus did it. He did the hard work, so that inspiration that isn't as magical anymore, like with the limited teachings about his life that we have a tendency to kind of bring on those old world magical thinking things, mm-hmm. even atonement and sacrifice and stuff. It's just magic. Mm-hmm. It's like saying, if I do this, then I can bend God's will to do what I want it to do, mm-hmm. right? Into this apostles of work and the work that it's going to take to do this, and that's, I think, a lot of where the line is are you just going to just fall into this magical thinking and just lazy devotee, the Urantia book calls it lazy devotees of magic, mm-hmm. or are you going to be real apostles of work?
Right.
And you look at what the apostles did, they flipped the world around, everywhere they went, they all got killed. Grotesque ways. But they were definitely not lazy in how it all went down.
Yeah, they did the work, Yeah. They got up there and did the work.
And you're doing it too, It's like, this is like our contribution. People who do things like this is our contribution to try to do that work.
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel, called or compelled to do something to make kind of a contribution. People who have studied the Urantia book for a while and want to just, share it, get the word out there. And so, I came up with this little book. You're doing the podcast, you're doing a ton of work. Like everybody has their little thing that they contribute with, I think. Maybe it's a study group. There's so many opportunities to learn more about Urantia book and to meet, great people who study it, interested in it.
Well, yeah, that's why I do this show, is to celebrate those such unique individuals who have committed to this life of service. And it's not service to get rich, dude. It's service for God's kingdom.
Right.
So people who do that, who commit to that level, I feel deserve to be known. And I have no authority whatsoever, but if I can help for them to get known, let's do this. That's my contribution. You know what I mean? So it's like, we need more examples and influences of people who are faith driven, as opposed to doctrine suppressed or whatever,
Exactly.
So I appreciate you, and I appreciate everybody else who does stuff like this. It's going to take a lot of us, and it's going to take a lot of time, I feel like, too.
Yeah, and I think that in this book, if somebody has a friend who's a Christian, especially, it doesn't have to be a Christian, but if somebody's kind of interested in religion, let's say, I'm just taking like about 22 chapters of questions that I've always asked myself. Should we fear God? why was the tomb empty?
Mm.
And what happened to the mortal body of Jesus afterwards? You know, there's been a lot of confusion about that. Who wrote the four Gospels? Should we take the Bible literally? Was it meant to be taken that way? And what would help make Christianity relevant to younger generations too? Because there's a whole bunch of people kind of leaving the church because they can't kind of put the science and the religion together because it seems like so separate. But one of the cool things about the Urantia books, it talks about how science and religion can coexist, right? That it's
that God loves the scientists as well, right? So
exactly.
If the scientists can just see themselves in this bigger science project, perhaps they can start to see the nature. I mean, I know scientists who love God and are a believer in God, and it increases and empowers their studies because they can have a creator force that is working out some kind of program here, and now we can start to decipher what that program is instead of just saying, oh, no, it's all random. It's like, so that structure that you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting. I think that as we can evolve, and it takes people like you and others to lead by demonstration, you might be alone for a while, of how science and religion are not at odds, you know, and that there is not a need to choose a camp and then cut off the other, that there's a source where it all comes from, and that is God and that's spirit, and it doesn't negate the existence of everything else. Exactly. Yeah.
And that's maybe one of the best things about the Urantia book, in my view, is that it brings us all together. You know, it's like, because we're all part of the human family, okay, we can believe different things, but ultimately we're kind of we're developing a individual spiritual experience, right? And Urantia book, I think, promotes that. It doesn't have to be like this set of dogma or this creed you have to follow word by word. You don't have to believe in all these certain rules or ceremonies. It's like an individual spiritual experience that makes sense to each of us, you know, based on the fatherhood of God, brotherhood of mankind, and we're basically all in this together.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of like what Jesus says, like, this is the temple, you know, God lives in this temple. Here's my church, you know, and that's very symbolic of that you are liberated in your independent relationship with God in spirit, yet we can still socialize and associate through that. I think it's hard for maybe people to understand what real liberation is, that true liberty comes from God's sonship. Because you're a child of God, then you have those liberties of life, versus irresponsibility and lack of accountability as liberty. You know what I mean? Like, there's a standard that needs to be upheld, but it's your choice to grow into that. It's not like someone's going to force you or punish you around that. It's the free will is so sovereign that you choose to step into that growth.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that you know, God trusted us with free will. You know, that's like an amazing thing, amazing responsibility that we have, to have individual free will of what we're going to believe, what we're going to do. I mean, we're not just like driven by instincts like the animal kingdom. You know, they don't have free will. They may be a little tiny sometimes, but humans, you know, we're given this huge gift of like, okay, I'm going to trust you. Here is free will. You can create your life any way you want. Go for it.
Yeah.
That's a big responsibility.
Well, you're a parent.
Yep.
You know, you had to and still do experience that, letting your child have their own individuality, right? And what that is, like, I know you're young and you're probably going to mess a few things up, and I still am allowing you to learn here instead of over control to a point of abuse where the child starts to experience paralysis of will at that point. They can't execute their own personal free will when there's such abuse and control.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of what you're implying around some of these religions, is that they thrusted us into this type of relationship with what we consider the creator.
Mm-hmm.
So we become paralyzed almost. We just can't create new things.
Right. And I think that's why a lot of younger people have kind of left the organized church and found their own thing. They still believe in God. They're still, spiritual beings and tuned into that. They just don't want to follow these old rules, or they don't fit into a certain kind of mindset, I guess,
Yeah. Those are the people who are so ripe for the Urantia Book, I feel like, because they want spiritual independence, but also reverence.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to be reverent around something that's sacred, yet they don't want to have their free will sacrificed around how they have a relationship around that sacredness.
Right.
And that's what, if they could bring in the teachings of Jesus, they'd truly be liberated in that. So it makes me think of how that then there's this reflection of God being, Jesus being this nature of God, a revelation of God's nature in a loving father sense, and the stabilizing goodness and wisdom that comes around, and the culture that comes in God's house. Like, imagine God as the father of a household.
Mm-hmm.
There's standards in that household, right? And we uphold those standards, and we bring them out into society, and we represent those standards.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in society at large, we're missing that personality, that force of vision, of wisdom, of divine intelligence that we can develop standards around. So we kind of slide back into those old laws.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to take more dynamic leadership in accordance with God's love.
Yep.
So I think, you're asking these questions that are starting to chip at the iceberg around that. Like, how does God really love you? Yeah.
Yeah, there's one other thing too that I think is good to bring up, that there's a happy ending. There's a positive future that the Urantia Book talks about. I know that a lot of people who maybe study the Bible and are into more of a literal interpretation, more of a conservative approach maybe, they're very concerned right now because, a lot of the people in their church and their ministers or pastors are talking about the end times.
Right.
Okay, they go to the book of Revelation in the Bible, and it's just like this amazing and bizarre revelation, that John is credited for seeing and writing down. But every time I hear like a minister on Christian radio talk about that, it's just like real fear-based downer.
Doom and gloom stuff.
Doom and gloom all the way. And it's like, wow, there's just no way out of this. And unless you're in like that small number of people who are going to get raptured. A lot of people think they are in that number, but I think it's not that huge of a number. Then everybody else is going to have to go through this tribulation and all this stuff. I mean, it's just a total bummer kind of scenario.
It is, and it's depressing. It's more reflective. I mean, it comes from older religious concepts. The beautiful thing about the Urantia Book is that it reveals to us around John and what he saw in his vision at Patmos versus what was edited later and brought in and garbled it up. And I mean, it's easy to research this, is that whoever edited the Revelations, book of Revelations, verbatim put in parts of the book of Ezekiel in there too. So there's all these visions that were just verbatim from Ezekiel. So it's obviously a tainted script, but there are notions, and I think I would say this to anyone watching, is that if you're going to read the book of Revelations, it's John when he's talking about God as a loving force. Everything else is suspect, and Jesus's nature to come in and just like a military type of guy like that's not reflective of the Jesus I know and that we've learned from. So you kind of see what we're up against, where you're trying to uplift the quality of thinking in a place where it's been purposely downgraded.
Yeah. And it's really kind of affecting our times right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If something happens in Israel or the Middle East, there's some, war flares up. Everybody's kind of, the people who are tuned into this way of thinking about Revelations, they think, okay, this is it. This time's getting really close, and people have been saying that for a few hundred years.
Yeah.
Even if it's going to, any day now, this is going to.
Yeah, it seems like we've been in this 7 years of tribulation for a long time now, well beyond 7 years. Yeah. But I think anything, it's lacking accountability. Here's Jesus setting standards for you to grow in the kingdom of God, growing your soul with your decisions. And here, a good majority of people are saying, oh, don't worry, we messed it up so bad that God's going to do it all for us, and we're not going to have to learn or grow. Like, that makes no sense. I mean, I go to the gym. I'm not going to expect the gym to blow up and then I'll get ripped, right? Like, I've got to go to the gym and work out.
Right.
So it's the same, that lazy devotee of magic kind of thinking. We just don't have details around Jesus's life and his mission in the Bible, though, like we do in the Urantia Book, that actually puts it in its place, I feel like.
Yeah.
So we're all planting seeds like you are.
Yeah, we're all truth seekers and, doing our best to figure out the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that mainly having a positive outlook and a positive future to work towards is a huge advantage to some of the old ways of thinking about Christianity. And, that there is, we're here to learn, right?
Mm.
We're here to learn, but this is not it. This is like the beginning of our school, Yeah. After this life, there's going to be something else.
That's a great point. And I think that reflects why an individual might become in that hardened, narcissistic everything now in this life, as opposed to expanding your timeline into eternity and eternal service. And then you don't have to be judged so wrathfully just from this one little segment, right? So that's that maturity of seeing the bigger picture. So I'm glad you brought that up, because as even Jesus is saying, don't be disheartened by discovering that you're human. Like those things that messed you up, they'll dissolve in time, and adopt a more expansive view of time.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much this splitting between either all good or all bad.
Yeah.
There's such a nuance around God's nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Lowel, for hanging out with us and sharing some of these stuff. I don't know if you have any parting messages that you might want to share with the audience, other than buy that book on Amazon.
Yeah, you can buy the book on Amazon. And really, it's if you know about the Urantia Book, it might be an interesting read.
Absolutely.
Just 100 pages. But it's mainly geared towards people who maybe don't know about the Urantia Book. They're just want to know more about it. They don't want to read 2,000 pages, but they might read 100 pages. This is kind of a teaser, like you were saying, of some of the things that they can read in the Urantia Book. And it covers a lot of just things that I've always asked myself, some questions about Christianity that I've had. And I think a lot of other people have had the same questions.
Yeah.
So maybe this was a good read to just see if you agree with what I'm saying here. I'm always up for feedback. Does this make sense to you? It's something that I've struggled with different parts of my life, and finally have the courage to kind of come out and say, well, this is how it is. I think this is, from everything I've learned and felt and, experienced in my life, I believe that what they're saying in the Urantia Book about the whole idea of Jesus, his teachings, Christianity,
and the nature of God.
Is accurate. So therefore, please go out and read it or promote it.
Yeah, well, I think you do a great job in bringing up controversial topics that many people could say in a more aggressive way.
Yeah.
But you're presenting them in a very curious way and non-threatening, even though they're highly controversial.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because it's like, if you ever watched Ted Lasso, there was one episode where they talked about being curious, not judgmental. So that's kind of my philosophy. Be curious, but not judgmental, because we're all in this boat, we're all trying to figure it out, do the best we can. And so definitely have grace, have a sense of grace with everybody that you meet. Consider maybe a different path, different part of the pathway, but everybody's on the path. So.
Yeah, well, amen to that. And I just want to thank you for all your efforts and all your help with my development as well. And just appreciate all your work, man. So God bless you. And God bless you guys for joining us. And let's just keep this work for the kingdom going, man.
Keep on keeping on.
Yeah, dude. Well, thank you, Lowel. And I look forward to whatever other efforts you put forth. And I know we'll be in contact around that.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Thank you guys for joining us. I wish you the best. God bless.